Hey, what's happening? Before we jump into the show, I wanted to see if you had any music on a hard drive. You have a band, you have a project, and you want to self-release your own music. Well, there's an easy way to do it. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate and go get your music up on all the streamers. You keep 100% of your royalties, and you can get 30% off by using this code. It's a great, easy way to get your music up on the streamers and share it with your fans, your friends, your family, your mom, your dog, everybody. Everyone wants to hear it. But go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate, HYPHENATE, and send me the link. I want to hear it too. Send your mom the link. Send your dog the link. They all want to hear it too. We'd like to thank our sponsor, iZotope, the absolute leaders in intuitively designed plugins for audio restoration, mixing, and mastering. At iZotope.com, you'll find a plethora of tools and suites that will enhance your audio production, whether it's voice, video, podcast, or a full production recording session. Check out the industry-standard audio repair tool, RX11, or the multi-tool mixer plugin, Neutron 5, or the powerful Ozone 11 mastering suite, plus tons more. Go to iZotope.com and use the code FRET10 at checkout for 10% off. That's FRET10 to get 10% off at checkout. And again, the website is iZotope.com, IZOTOPE.com.
During punk rock days, he was a substitute teacher. That was the first thing that I had heard. What does Bill do for money? What does Bill do during the day? But that was just sort of the starting point for Bill, because he always seemed to be living way beyond his means. How was he affording to? He was jet setting every other week, flying to whatever part of the world that he needed to go to, whether it was to see a punk show in some basement in Sweden, whether it was to see Os Mutantes in Brazil, whether it was to get with Shonen Knife in Osaka, Japan.
Hello, welcome to Hyphenate Halftime with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, October 30th, 2025. On today's show, I present my conversation with filmmaker, historian, documentarian, raconteur, Mr. Dave Markey. It's been a dream to talk to Dave. We've crossed paths over the years in various film circles and friend circles, and his film, 1991, The Year Punk Broke, was a huge influence on me in my life and my overall outlook on music and touring and just overall bandness. For those not familiar with it, it was a documentary that Dave made about going on tour with Sonic Youth in 1991 when they played a bunch of shows with Nirvana. They're on tour with Nirvana, who was the opening band, or who was the just breaking band, just about to change the world band. And Sonic Youth was the headliner, big brother sort of band. But you also have Dinosaur Jr. in there. You have, who else is on there? Babes in Toyland, Mudhoney, the Ramones. Yeah, I could have done a whole chat just about 1991, The Year Punk Broke. But on today's show, we talk about his upcoming project, his current project, his work in progress project, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. It's an incredible film. I got to see a working cut of it. He was nice enough to share with me. But should be out soon, should be out next year, but this is kind of a a call for attention, or for, there was a Kickstarter going around, and you definitely can find more information and support the film, because it's a very, very worthy cause. It's a great film. You can go to wegotpowerfilms.com to contribute to the Kickstarter, to watch the trailer, to learn about all things about the Secret Lives of Bill Bartell, who he himself would have been an incredible podcast guest or podcast host, or he could have ran 10 different podcasts, and you wouldn't know if any of them were true or not. You really get a sense for the man and his mania, and just the excitement for life and impact he had on what we know as the alternative music scene, or as the sort of punk into then the 90s, music world of everything. Really one of those people I'd always seen pictures of and had White Flag 7 inches. And it was sort of impossible not to see him around. He always stood out with the mustache, and he always made an interesting figure. But I didn't know him personally. But I knew him, around ideas of him, and then talking with Dave, it's like so much of what was the cool underground idiosyncratic sort of love of all things 70s, and just so weird and out there. It's cool tastemaker sort of stuff. Can be traced back to Bill Bartell. Os Mutantes, Shona Knife, like he talks about, in the intro there. Just really somebody who introduced a lot of really cool music and art and bands to the world, and sort of used his influence within that world. Definitely would have been an influencer, but how were you an influencer before social media? Well, it's sort of the Bill Bartell story of, keeping it mysterious, keeping it attractive, keeping it, on everyone's minds, the back of everyone's minds or the front of their minds. Dave made a really incredible film about Bill, and everyone should go check it out. So go to wegotpowerfilms.com. You can also go follow Dave on the Instagrams. It's David J. Markey, DavidJMarkey. And you can also follow The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. I'm not going to spell all that, but The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell is also on Instagram, where you can get updates, see clips and photos, and just to be a supporter. I am a supporter of it. It's incredible. It's a really fun sort of nexus of all things 90s alternative rock related. Kind of get the backstory from the people who were there and the people who were behind the scenes, sort of, pulling the lever, so to speak, or at least influencing and, doing interesting, subversive art and music at a time, when all of that was, still possible in some ways. And it definitely feels like a setup of some things that were to come in the world. I think there's a lot more Bill Bartells, or people who wish there were Bill Bartells out there in the world. I think there's only one Bill Bartell, but just this idea of not only being a musician or just being one thing, but having the real hyphenate, sort of moniker of just running record labels, being in bands, and then working day jobs and keeping it mysterious, keeping it always on the edge of what do people need to know or what's going on, but just it seems like unending energy and excitement for life and for music and art. So really cool film. Secret Lives of Bill Bartell by David Markey. And I'll let Dave talk more about the film. And thanks everybody for being here. I hope everyone is ready for Halloween. It's exciting. Hope you have your costumes picked out, your trick-or-treat route planned. I think we're all locked and loaded here as the family. We got little littles and bigger littles, and we're going to figure it all out. We're going to divide and conquer, get some big kid events in there and some littler kid events in there. And it's fun. Pumpkins are carved. Costumes are purchased. And, wow. What a fun time. Time is flying by. So, everybody have fun, be safe this weekend, and I will see you on Monday with Farley, and we will, do the whole halftime catch up on all of these things. But thank you, Dave, for coming on. Thank you everybody for listening. You can, email me hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Randy S. Randall, and tell your friends, tell your family, recommend it to everybody that they should, listen to the podcast, subscribe, turn on the automatic downloads, all the fun stuff you do with Instagrams, with podcasts, wherever you watch this, YouTube, podcast catchers everywhere. Dave, thanks so much for coming on Hyphenate. How are you doing this evening?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. Your new film, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. It's incredible. It'll be out soon for everyone.
Soon, yes.
Yeah.
Not sure on the exact date at the moment. Either at the end of the year or the beginning of next.
Okay, it's fantastic. Yeah, well, I mean, this definitely feels like a work of love. I mean, this is not a commercial, project. I don't know if anybody else could even make this film. Can you tell me a little bit about your history of knowing Bill and sort of how this film came to be?
Okay, I met Bill probably in 1981, maybe 82. So many years ago. And, I couldn't say that we were fast friends, but we ended up, meeting each other in many different junctions, whether it's playing shows together. I had a band, he had a band, or I know White Flag did an interview for my fanzine. But actually, I myself didn't even do it. But Bill did, after a few years of knowing him, he did offer to release the soundtrack record to my 1984 Super 8 film, Desperate Teenage Love Dolls. And that was one of the first of many sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say collaborations, but one of many just sort of dealings with Bill and the world of Bill and Gas Tanker Records and White Flag and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like quite the character. I mean, and this is speaking of a scene that was filled with characters. You know what I mean? It really says something. I can imagine to stand out in that crowd of unique individuals in that way, and there's something about him that comes across in the film that almost puts him on the spectrum of excitement. And it's something a high energy. I don't know if that's putting it.
Definitely on some sort of spectrum.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you also asked me how, the film came to be.
Yeah.
And this is a film that I wanted to make in the 90s. I tried doing it around 1994, and I even had the title for it, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. And I tried interviewing him, and he was not cooperating in typical Bill fashion. He wasn't having any of it. He wasn't going to let me make a movie about him. But, it's funny, circling back to it decades later. And it was just a project that came back to me via, I wouldn't even say a friend, but someone that I just peripherally knew. Brian Kehoe approached me right before the pandemic and said, "Hey, are you interested in making a doc on Bill Bartell?" And then I told him about, The Secret Lives, the film that I was trying to make while he was alive, which would have been a very different film. And at that time, I was like envisioning private eyes to follow him and do this investigative work in his day-to-day life. This film, of course, is something else entirely different. And I don't think I would have been capable of making this film at that time. So it worked out all for the better.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like there's definitely his presence is obviously felt in the film, but his loss, and by not only his family and his friends, but also that feeling of, that never really knowing the whole picture of the man, even while he was alive.
It was, I knew him for the better part of 30 years, and I knew him pretty well. And it took years to get through layers of him. But still, even knowing him for as long as I have, and even as at points in times when we were, close, still, there was still a difficult barrier of getting through to him. And I can't say he was like any other person I've ever known. A lot of people say that in the film. That's kind of like, that keeps cropping up. But I mean, honestly, I didn't, have anyone else to compare, him to. And so the film is basically a process of interviewing people, speaking with people that he knew, speaking with people that a lot of people I knew, but that knew him that I didn't know. So I got to meet quite a few different people that were associated with him through the process of making this film that I had never really met before or chatted with. So it was just several years of that, of doing interviews, and then actually sitting down and trying to put it all together.
There's a lot there. I mean, one thing that struck me, a lot of the people that are around in music and art and stuff, and you can usually read the motivation, you know what I mean? Whether it's money or influence or sex or drugs or these kinds of things. There's your standard sort of rock and roll lifestyle MO, right? The hangers-ons, if they're not in the band, there's a lot of people around the band. And my first thought was, well, okay, Bill's in that milieu. He's in that sort of scene of hangers-on. But as the story is unfolded in the film, there's more to it than that. There wasn't, and it's a hard one to parse, the details of. There's not a groupie, but he also wasn't necessarily a contemporary, but maybe closer to a collaborator or co-conspirator is sort of what it felt like. It seemed as though there was this mischievous sense of like the Merry Pranksters or something, from like a hippie era or bygone sort of just madcap, sort of just wanting to see what he could get into, and not necessarily for his own benefit. Like didn't seem like he was trying to make money off of anyone or exploit anyone. It was more for his amusement. I mean, is there a better light that you could shed on that in terms of what his motivation?
I think you're kind of on it there. I mean, I think one could speculate and go on speculating for days his motivations. I mean, it seemed that for all the energy that he had, and he had boundless energy, it seemed that he was almost more focused on other things and other people rather than himself and his band. He seemed to just spread his energy out through so many different channels. And it just wasn't him, and his band White Flag. He had his record label, right? And, then he had his various careers that he did to supplement his kind of non-existent income, like during the 80s, during punk rock days, he was a substitute teacher. And that was the first thing that I had heard. Like, what does Bill do for money? What does Bill do during the day? So I was kind of aware of that back then. And, but that was just sort of the starting point for Bill, because he always seemed to be living way beyond his means. How was he affording to? He was jet setting every other week, flying to whatever part of the world that he needed to go to, whether it was to see a rock show, whether it was to see some, punk show in some basement in Sweden, whether it was to see, Os Mutantes in Brazil, whether it was to get with Shonen Knife in Osaka, Japan, whether it was just to go see Kiss in New York City, which he did repeatedly. In fact, he liked to brag that he saw every New York City show Kiss played in their career, going back to the early 70s. And I believe him. And, how did he pull that off? It left a lot of people scratching their heads.
Yeah, I get the sense from the interviews too with some of the, the musicians and celebrity musicians, of this kind of note, that it's not that he was a fan of theirs, but they were a fan of his. That he had his own, the people liked talking about him and trading stories about him, just almost as a hobby, or like a heavy metal parking lot, like a tape that would get passed around on tour buses, like stories of Bill would get passed around at shows.
Bill was responsible for spreading heavy metal parking lot.
Of course.
I mean, you want to get like meta
Look up
about
Delling.
this.
Yeah, this is like any.
Bill Bartell was spreading that tape around, and he gave it out as a Christmas gift in
Of course.
92 or 93. And he gave it to, Nirvana, and he gave it to all of his friends in bands. And then all the people in bands started bringing it on their tour bus and showing it to people.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, Heavy Metal Parking Lot becomes this phenomenon. Bill did that out of love for the film. He wasn't, I think, he had at one point in time developed a relationship with the filmmaker or filmmakers after they had made the film, because he had seen it and became obsessed with it. But that was just an example of what Bill did. Bill would just obsess over something and spread it and get it to people and sort of become an influencer, if you were, before there was any sort of such notion of influencer, before there was any sort of social media. Bill was like human social media, the way he operated.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm surprised a record label like Geffen or Capitol or one of these places never scooped him up as A&R. I mean, he seemed to have the ear and the line on everybody, of all the cool people and tastemakers. I'm sure he could have done.
Ironically enough, when he was underage and he'd somehow talked his way into an advertising agency in Los Angeles, and he got a job, and he was like 16 or 17. They thought he was, 20, 21. And, they of course were, thought he was a brilliant guy. And then when they found out how young he was, it wasn't like they wanted to fire him. They just
didn't know what to do.
Wanted to keep him around, but he was unable to hold the job because he had to commute from Riverside every day into LA. And that's another story about Bill, is he lived further out than Riverside. He lived in Moreno Valley, which is quite a ways into the Riverside County line.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was known as Sunnymead, a city that doesn't even exist anymore, the city that was wiped off the map. So, and that's where he was born and raised. It was very rural community, sort of farming, sort of just could be any town USA, could be the Midwest, could be anywhere else but LA. Yet Bill was hearing the siren call of Los Angeles and Hollywood, and he just had to be here. Yet, ironically enough, he never moved here or lived here, but he spent so much time here, and most of his time was commuting back and forth. And as a kid, I believe the reason why he lost that advertising agency job is because he had gotten into a fender bender, and his parents took the car away from him because they were angry about getting sued over this kind of silly incident on the freeway. So who knows, if Bill hadn't lost that job, maybe he would have become a major Madison Avenue player.
Yeah, I mean, there's something very almost Warhol-like as well, about this kind of person. Except, he, for as much of a tempest in a teapot, or as much as the center of the circle, it was almost as though he enjoyed being the background. He didn't necessarily.
Well, he enjoyed being in the background, maybe career-wise, but personality-wise, it was the opposite. He wanted to be up front, and he would just walk into a room and command the room and he had a very kind of overwhelming personality, and like you were either on the bus or off the bus with him, and he was very easily put someone off. He was pretty acerbic. He was pretty kind of brutal in a way to a lot of people, but at the same time he could be the most sweetest guy. It was just like, after a while, he became a Where's Waldo figure. He became this, you look at all these old LA punk scene photos. There's Bill. You look at all these moments in time with bands, not just, the Germs or the original LA punk scene. You go and you look into the history of heavy metal bands, whether it's Judas Priest or Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult. Bill was, UFO, a complete obsessive of that kind of music as well. And he had a way of siding up to people, and he had a skill of creating fake backstage passes and getting back. And he also had a skill with approaching his rock star idols, whether it was Kiss or Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. And in 1980, Bill actually not only names an Iron Maiden album, which was made in Japan, which was Bill's suggestion to Steve Harris. He ended up dressing Steve Harris in this black and white striped outfit that Bill's mother had made for Bill, that Steve saw Bill wearing, that Steve Harris really liked. And if you look at the Iron Maiden Run to the Hills video, you see him wearing this outfit that came from Bill and was made by Bill's mother. So Bill just wasn't influencing people and naming their records. He was outfitting them.
That is wild. I mean, this is not in the documentary.
Again,
this is not
many stories. And that story itself didn't even make it into the film because there's so much other stuff. But I mean, that will be part of the supplemental. I have actually a 47-minute bonus movie.
Oh my God.
Of stuff that was great, but just didn't work in the context of the film and the narrative that I was crafting for that story.
Sure. Yeah. It sounds like there's a ton, there's so much more there. I mean, any one of these stories about one person would be the thing of legend. Oh, I knew a guy in college who did XYZ, just one of those things, and you mentioned the film that he gave Kurt Cobain, the Daniel Johnston shirt he wore on the MTV Music Awards. Another
example of Bill outfitting rock stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was just a gift. Bill was aware that Kurt was a huge fan of Daniel Johnston, and he got him a t-shirt. And, I once got Kurt Cobain a t-shirt too. That he was on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Oh, there you go.
Rock Duck shirt.
Oh, yeah.
You see it in my film, 1991, The Year Punk Broke.
Sure.
I was there on that tour, and that was the time, that 2-week tour where I was closest to those guys, and Kurt and Nirvana, and through Sonic Youth and all that. That film that I made way back when. And Kurt opens this film,
Yeah. Where was that footage from? Was that footage
it's taken from a Brazilian MTV interview where, again, Bill the influencer getting Kurt to listen to Os Mutantes and whispering in his ear saying, if you go to Brazil, you have to talk about this band on television. And Kurt does, and boom, this immediately revives the long dormant career of Os Mutantes. This immediately puts them on, not just South American, but, all the Americans and the rest of the world, put them on the map, establish them. And then David Byrne swoops in and sort of gets all the credit for it. That's the problem with Bill. He did a lot of things, but it was all in the shadows and no one knew. No one knew that Bill, through stalking Kiss, being obsessed not only with the band, but their manager, Bill Aucoin, befriending Bill Aucoin, whispering in Bill Aucoin's ear, you got to go check this band out. They're from England. They're called Generation X. They're great. Now, Bill Aucoin never would have heard of Generation X and never would have flown to England to seek them out if it wasn't for the prodding of Bill Bartell. And he did. And what did Bill Aucoin do? He signs Generation X and basically breaks the band up and just takes Billy Idol and makes Billy Idol the star. And none of that would have happened without Bill Bartell. Back to the Zelig thing, back to the influence thing, back to just the unseen hand of Bill. And no one knows this stuff,
That's what
I didn't even know that story. And I knew Bill for 30 years, and I didn't know that particular story until getting into doing the work on this film.
It's incredible. Do you think, was that how he wanted it to be, that he would work in the shadows, or do you think he wanted the credit and
it just sort of
frustrated?
I think Bill would have loved the credit, but he was so involved in so many things, doing so much, that he was mostly focused on whatever the next thing would be. He wouldn't even have time. But I think maybe he felt a little cheated by the world. But I mean, a lot of it was just really the way he did things too. I think, again, I think if he would have been able to focus on his own self and his own music and his own band, I'm sure he would have had much greater success with that. But he did not give that up. He kept that going for 30 years, and he took that band on the road tirelessly, touring, places that no other bands would go, like, Assat, Greenland, or the Faroe Islands, or places where no sane band would book a tour. But Bill didn't care. Bill liked to do things the hard way. Bill liked to do things the awkward way. If it wasn't awkward, he wasn't interested. It's just the way he was.
That's crazy. Did you try to get in touch with Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley in making the film? Was that, I mean, obviously it's a big part.
I believe there was a memo that got out to Gene and Paul, but Gene and Paul knew who he was, and they, through mutual friends, we know people that were very close and working with Kiss that are in the film. And through them, we learned that Gene and Paul basically issued a photograph of Bill and passed it out backstage and said, "This guy is not allowed here. If you see him, he needs to be gone."
Oh, no.
And, I mean, and this is the end result of him stalking Kiss for decades, showing up at their press conferences, just being a fly in the ointment, just being really annoying. And he was really good at that. And he enjoyed doing that more than anything else. It was like he, on one level, was a performance artist, and no stage was too small for him. He was always performing, even if it's just for a couple kids in a car who he pulled over when he was working as a police officer for the Beaumont Police Department in Riverside County. And he sees these goth girls with a Christian Death bumper sticker on their car, and he pulls them over just to harass them about their Christian Death bumper sticker. And, Bill's playing the part of the cop and saying, to the girls, going like, "Christian Death, what does that mean? You got something against Christians?" And the girl's like, "Oh, no, officer, they're just a band. They're a rock band that we like." And Bill's like, "Yeah, I know. I played with them 5 years ago at the Cathay de Grant. Here's a sticker." And he hands them a white flag sticker, gets back in his patrol car, and takes off. That's what I mean. No stage was too small for Bill. He lived his life to do that. Again, even if it was for an audience of one or two.
I mean, it's like almost like an Andy Kaufman-esque thing, but again,
yes, very, very much. I think in maybe in an early bio I wrote for the film, I did mention Andy Kaufman in a way to sort of explain his personality, but Bill was just even beyond that. I mean, Andy Kaufman almost made more sense.
Well, at least, yeah, he was an entertainer. He presented himself as a stand-up in which he could be paid money for this. Like, whereas Bill had no trade for his theater of the absurd. He never sought to get paid as a performer. There's something I guess too that reminds me of sort of in kin to that, like a Nardwuar the Human Serviette, where he sort of carved a lane for himself to be the person, the fly in the ointment that he is, but right. he branded it. He created a silo, he created a lane for himself to work constructively in the music industry, or at least within the construct of the music industry.
Sure. Character. I mean,
yeah.
For better or worse. I mean, it's just like, where do you start with Bill?
Yeah.
It was a really challenging project for me, and I really kind of relished it. And it was a very personal film for me as well. maybe a bit different from other films that I've made. This is a film about a person, and I never took that on before. With that came a great responsibility, and
what were some of those challenges in doing it?
Just telling the story of someone's life. I had not done that before, and because I knew Bill and loved Bill, I didn't want to blow it. And sometimes they say you could be too close to something. I don't think that affected this project at all. And in fact, I think there's just I think you said it earlier, there's no one else could have made this movie. No one else would have made this movie. Even if you knew little bits and pieces about the guy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does just, it just feels so personal. It feels like it's coming from a friend. You know what I mean? Where with any documentary or any film, the point of view of the filmmaker is the film itself, and what's on screen, and it just feels so, from a friend. And as I was getting towards the end, I was like, there's a sadness, there's a tragedy to the story. Sure. But even in talking with you now here, it does feel so much like, part of me, I'm like, I think he knew how to live. It sounds like, for all of the ups and downs and the challenges he did have, but, the idea of embracing life, carpe diem, and living life to your fullest, and just doing stuff for the thrill of doing it, and just being almost the purest of hearts. There's something very celebratory about that as well. Like, maybe it makes me want to reconsider my own creative choices. Like, why am I not just going out and crashing a Beatles, festival as a no cover band? Like, why?
There's a price to pay though for that. I mean, and Bill pays the price, It can almost be a cautionary tale too.
In what way?
I mean, I agree exactly with what you just said, but also on the flip side of that, it's like there were certain aspects of Bill's life where I don't think he was okay with who he was, as much as he probably relished who he was at the same time. So there was a duality there, and there was something that just wasn't quite right about Bill and his sort of uncomfortableness in his own skin, which I think eventually just led for the pathway to his demise.
I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think kind of speaking to the queerness, in the story and in the biography of it, and from your own biography too. I mean, the story of alternative queer culture is not always a clear path. Within the closeted scene and the punk queer stuff. I mean, I feel like there's very much an established, queer scene within the punk music now that exists and very much holds its own. And there's, I think an acceptance and a progressiveness and the punk of what we know in 2025. But obviously that didn't exist then. I mean, as was that something that you and him ever talked about? I mean, it doesn't sound, Bill
and I were really close friends. We were both very well aware of our sexuality, but yet Bill, even with me and Bill's other gay friends, he would not discuss matters of sexuality even with his gay friends, which was just really weird and odd. And like,
if you can't be comfortable there, why?
Where are you? Like, if you can't be comfortable with people you've known for years, you're obviously not comfortable. Just period. I think that might have been it.
That's a tragedy to that.
And I think maybe that was starting to change towards the end of his life, but yet he lived his life in such a way that he ran his life into the ground. He was not taking care of himself. He gave himself diabetes, and it just, spirals from there. And that's where we get into just the really sad part of the story, where you realize just, I think when Bill passed, it really was something that caught me off guard. And I guess I had never thought about Bill dying before, and then he died. And then it took me a number of years to wrap my head around it and figure it all out. And so I guess in a way the film, is a part of that process as well. I maybe came to some conclusions during the making of it, during the discussions with people that were close to him, and the way we conducted the interviews were kind of different too. They were very much like, it wasn't like there was this typical agenda that one might find in a documentary film. This was more like, again, the connections between people, the relationships, the friendships going back so many years, and being able to discuss things really in a way it's like getting together with your best friends and having a discussion. That's kind of like the world that the film was sort of made in. And maybe that made it a little bit different than a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And also, I've never really, I think there is a new film that's coming out that discusses sort of a queer identity within the punk scene. But before this film, I've never really seen much documentary film, especially in punk world, that gets into that, to the gay side of this music and this culture and this time. And of course, we're talking the original LA punk scene, which was filled with gays and lesbians and transgendered and many other walks of life. It was more of a normal thing that existed within that original, small, insular LA punk scene. And then the 80s roll around and hardcore comes in, and punk sort of transmorphs into this much younger suburban crowd that didn't come from art school or glam rock or anywhere else, that weren't fans of David Bowie and Lou Reed. But, that's the world. The hardcore punk world is the world that I came up in, but instantly was completely going back and checking out all the original Los Angeles punk rock. And of course, starting with the Germs. And I like that Bill's story, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, Bill's story period starts with the Germs, but his story of coming into Hollywood and getting involved in music certainly starts with the Germs. And, when Darby Crash died, most people in that time frame, your casual punk fan, had no idea of Darby's sexuality because Darby didn't discuss it. Darby gave himself a girlfriend during the interview for the decline of Western civilization.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of like watching the Village People movie. Can't Stop the Music.
Yeah,
they have girlfriends.
Character.
They have girlfriends. The Village People, have girlfriends in that movie. Kind of like, that's just like what, late 70s, still very much the era of the closet. And that was the world that Bill was in at the time, and perhaps never really sort of grew out of that experience.
Wow. We just have a few minutes left. I want to make sure we get the word out. Where can people find out more about the film? And if they want to, just keep in touch with you or follow up, find out more about your films and what you've been doing. Where are the best places for everyone to learn more?
I have a website for my body of work, wegotpowerfilms.com. That details my 45 years plus of film work and music work and photography work and whatnot. The film itself does not have a website. We do have an Instagram, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell, at Instagram. That's where I would point someone to if they were interested in the film, because we will detail every bit of information as it becomes available, as far as release goes, as far as keeping up on, whatever aspect of of Bill Bartell mania and the world of Bartell. And so there's that. I also am pretty active on social media and very easy to find. If you seek me out on Instagram or Facebook, you will find me. I'm there.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, we'll have links to all of those websites and the Instagram handles here in the show notes down below. So
any other aspect of the film that you care to ask me about in our last couple minutes here?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, there's really so much. I mean, it was really one of those things. It's almost impenetrable in the way that it kept coming, sideways, this, shown a knife, and now we're over here. I guess, I mean, the one thought I had, just in looking at it is it seemed as though you were about to say that the house, I'm spacing on the name of the house in Riverside, was this seems like the setup for Suburbia, for Penelope Sphere's narrative follow-up to
the Haruba house.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. In Riverside.
Yeah, that was Renee from Death Patrol's house where the Riverside scene sort of grew out of. And I wanted to get more. I mean, I do spend a little bit of time on the Riverside scene, and I did want to get into Renee's story, but we just didn't have the time in the film to do that. She died tragically she was struck by a car on the freeway.
Oh God.
Coming back from a Queen concert, and her passenger happened to be Pat Smear at the time, who witnessed the whole thing.
Lord.
And so that Renee's death was sort of the death of the Harupa house, and sort of like that punk rock crash pad in the model of the TC house from Penelope Spheeris' Suburbia, which is a movie you could see me in if you look closely enough. That was a little extra in the background.
But was that something did she base her film on that house, or
she based her film on the Oxford house up in Hollywood, a different youth punk crash pad. I think those houses existed everywhere in every pocket of the country. They had their one, punk rock flop house. I think that was pretty much de rigueur of the day.
Sure. Okay. I wasn't sure. It was like, was Suburbia supposed to be in Riverside? Was it based on all of the stuff? It seemed like it just everything lined up so closely.
My understanding is it was based on the Oxford house in Hollywood.
Okay.
Rock, crash pad there. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's so much. I mean, that, in terms of just, the stories. I mean, I guess the other one that I was curious about was, Courtney Love, and sort of in this world, obviously she is a character in her own right, but it sounds as though she was obviously part of this with Kurt was with it and everything else. But
sure. I think Courtney sort of made the introduction possible between Bill and Kurt.
Okay. Yeah. She was the LA person, and yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I really love the documentary. I really want everyone to go out and see it and to support what you do. I've been a big fan for a lot of years. I had 1991 on VHS when I was a MTV kid. So I just want to say thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There he is, David Markey. Thank you so much for coming on. Hyphenate. Everybody go to wegotpowerfilms.com to support the film, watch the trailer, and get the latest up-to-date information on when you can watch this incredible film. You can also follow Dave on Instagram at David J. Markey, and also on the Instagram, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. That's the Instagram page for the film. Tons of behind-the-scenes photos and more photos of Bill and his many different iterations and identities, as you've heard, and just get to know more of the story there. It really is a wild one. What is this stuff? Oh my gosh, I'm looking at it now. Adolescence, yeah, so cool, man. It's really a deep dive. You can get lost in the Bill Bartell rabbit hole for sure. So thank you again, Dave, for coming on. Everybody, go out there, follow Dave, follow the film, support the film if you can on the Kickstarter, and yeah, thanks so much. We will see you on Monday. Be safe out there. Have fun. And write us. Let me know how your Halloween went. Did you see any good Halloween shows? Halloween cover shows. Always incredible, fun things to happen. Let me know what your best Halloween cover show memories are. You can write me on Instagram at Randy S. Randall. You can also write the show, hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. Make sure to rate and review the show and turn on automatic downloads and tell your friends. All right. See you on Monday. Keep it spooky.
he, on one level, was a performance artist, and no stage was too small for him. He was always performing, even if it's just for a couple kids in a car who he pulled over when he was working as a police officer for the Beaumont Police Department in Riverside County.